everybody, this is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? Happy 420. For those of you who celebrate that, I don't condone it. I think it's very healthy. Anywho, please, it's free, like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. That helps me get the word out and the mission that I am on. My allergies are absolutely crazy today, so be mindful. And I've been taking my drops. Have a box. These guys help with allergies. If you're interested and you need some organic supplement that you suck on, tastes really good, and helps you breathe and helps your allergies, let me know. We're going to continue on with the Book of Wars because it's so good. How can I not? And I got to sort of step up my video game here because time is crunching, and crunch time means I don't know what's going to happen. So any little help that you have that you can express, I appreciate it. Times are getting really rough. Not how I wanted things to be. I'm trying to manifest. I'm trying to just be calm about the situation instead of freaking out. But it's getting scary. So Oahspe. We're going to pick up on chapter 41, I believe. Yes, 41. Darker and darker the Haddon fields held before the touch of Jehovah's hand to try the self-assumed Lord God and his heavenly works, as if an epoch new and terrible had come to one so audacious, who foremost in the name of the Great Spirit for mortals and give them instead a heavenly ruler in the image of man. For before this, all nations knew the office of gods and lords and reverenced them as Jehovah's high officers raised up spirits of the dead, wise and powerful. But now, in 5 great divisions of earth, Satan's Haddon chief had bound his name in mortals with the threatened penalties and even death for mentioning Jehovah's name, and to put them to the test, made oaths on burning flesh that whoso would not eat thereof should die. Before this was the criterion, before the courts, that they refused fish and flesh food, or would not pollute the body by noxious drinks and smoke, intoxicating to the senses, were possessed of Jehovah worship, and so deserved torture and death. So the names of Lord and Lord God and Deus had now become for 1,000 years fixed in mortals' minds as the Creator, a large man sitting on a throne in Horde, his heavenly seat watched and guarded by his sons Anubi, keeper of the scales and the gate to heaven, to make a plausible story of which the angels, through oracles and magicians and priests and prophets, proclaimed that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and all things therein and thereon. And he was tired and rested, and as if creation was a completed work, left certain laws to run the wonderful machine while as he sat afar off, looking on, smiling at the pranks of mortals and their failure to understand him, with a devil and a horrid fire to torture their souls, if they sang not in praise of this compounded false Lord God. Thus turned he, their false God, the voice of mortals, from him who is ever present, whose speech hath every soul heard, whose presence moved all things in heaven and earth. The false God turned them to sing and pray to himself, so he should clutch and bind their souls in endless slavery. Untaught, half-fed as drudges, to bring into his capital, provider and building stones to glorify him forever. Over Jaeth, far and wide, this traitor to Jehovah had sealed in stone, and papyrus and wood, and sacred cloth, his name, Hojas, to suit the panic voice, as wireless in Vinu, he made them engrave it Deus, to fit the Vedic tongue, and thence in Florence, to suit their higher spirited race. Adonai, Edga, and go over to Helleste and less distinct and bastard Greece. Whisper Zeus, saying these words are watchwords to gain a newbie's ear and turn the scales for endless paradise. Go ye, slaves, engrave my names, and in mortal libraries register my great exploit of how I created the world, and make me spotless, pure, letting sin into races of men by Osiris' cunning tale of Eve's weakness by fault of the earth. For I am not come like Jehovah's captains, spirits sent to rule men for a season, but a very good God of blood and bones, who once in terrible anger flooded the earth to drown my disobedient sons and daughters. Make ye them to tremble and draw long breath when my name is spoken, or by my own soul. I will hurl heaven and earth into endless chaos. Pressing downward, Jai came slowly and surely. The very motion spake as a million tongues. Serious, awful. For many on every side of the hosts of an Anunnaki were deserting him, as one in a small way may see on a sinking ship how the exert swimmers with strong arms leap into the water boldly and swim for the far off shore, while the helpless in frantic rage cluster fast upon the distracted officers, blockading them from doing good. So began the tumult in the fast descending plateau. Horde was increased 100-fold by the flood of Jujas cast upon Deus' kingdom by his own traitorous false gods. Deus' generals and captains first treated music to hold the 40,000 million to peace and order, but the ensuers themselves took fright, and by the million fled, flying down to the earth to Osiris, or Tn's, or Sudga's kingdoms, and overflooding mortals with ghostly revelries. Next, by parades and rites in great procession, did Deus' officers seek to divert the panic-stricken millions. Thus, for years, the maddened god, with wonderful strength of will, almost held his own, inventing tens of thousands of stratagems. But at last, in the downward course, horrid touch upon the corporeal earth, and suddenly, as if startled by the shock, the frantic millions screamed, and then, alas, all order died. The doors of hell were opened. Anunnaki's throne and capital, with all their splendor, the maddened mob broke loose to pillage or destroy, and then rushed in the fault finders, shouting, "Thy lying God, but like a man, who art thou, and thou a newbie, deceiving judge, 1,000 horrid deaths to see." But the unlearned Jujas knew not who was rank or officer, God or judge, but seized the pale and trembling Deus and Anubi, and more than 1 million officers overpowered them by 10 million to 1, pressed on by the foul-smelling crowd. And now, with blows and kicks and cuffs, on every side began the awful fray, till stretched as wide as the earth, the countless millions were plunged into hell, whereupon to right and left was now an increasing battle, and all the hosts of the Lord God were sworn by vengeance against anyone they came against. Then came the torturers, casting into the hells most offensive smells and suffocating gases, crammed in the nose and the mouth of their victims. No more were the Lord God and Anubi seen, but swallowed up in the measureless darkness, where every soul sought nothing good, but labored hard to give unto others excruciating tortures for vengeance sake. And just off-key correlation here, the reptilians smell like sulfur. Drudras, Dracos. Just making that, inserting my little thinking light bulb. God and Khrushchev prayed Jehovah what he would do to release Deus and Anubi. Jehovah answered, saying, My son, thou shalt first labor for them that desire, whoso courteth darkness, deserveth not thy hand. I have proclaimed from since the olden time, warning to them that put me away, but in their self-conceit they denied my person and power. Wert thou this day to deliver from hell Deus and Anubi, and their thousands of millions of self-torturing slaves, they would not use their deliverance to mock my creation, saying, It lasted not, it was but a breath of wind. For which reason thou shalt not yet meddle with hell's abhorred. 400 years I will bring the earth into another dawn of light. Till then, let Deus and Anubi and their hosts take their course. God inquired concerning Osiris and Tian and Sidka, and Jehovah answered him, saying, Sufficient unto them is the light they have received. Suffer them also to take their course, for they also shall become involved in hells of their own building. But be thou attentive to my chosen, the faithless, in all parts of heaven and earth, not suffering one of them to fall into the hells of my enemies. God acquainted Ahura with Jehovah's words. Then Ahura prayed to Jehovah, saying, O Father, grant thou to me that I may go to Osiris and Tian and Sidka to plead their cause. Behold, the Lord God is locked up in hell. Even high-rise gods would not find it safe to go to him. Jehovah said, Why, O Ahura, desirest thou to go to Osiris and to Tian and to Sidka? Knowest thou not how difficult it is to alter the mind of a mortal man, and yet these self-gods are tenfold more stubborn? Ahura said, I know, I cannot change them to break this matter of conceit, and all learned men are liable to fall therein, none but thou. O Jehovah has it power. But these self-gods were long ago my most beloved friends. Behold, I will go to them as a father would to a son, and to plead with them. Jehovah gave permission to Ahura to visit them, the three great self-gods. So Ahura fitted out an octagon, and with 10,000 attendants and 1,000 heralds, and with 5,000 musicians, besides the officers of the fire ship, set sail for Chi-Su-Gro, Tian's heavenly place, over Jaeth. And when he arrived near the place, he halted and sent his heralds ahead to inquire if he could have audience with Tian. Tian received the heralds cordially and began, informed of their object, sent back this word. Tian, the most high ruler of heaven and earth, sendeth greeting to Ahura, commanding his presence, but forbidding Ahura and his host from speaking to any soul in Chi-Su-Gro, save himself, Tian. Ahura received this insulting message with composure, and then proceeded and entered the capital city, the heavenly place of Tien, where he was met by 1,000,000 slaves arrayed in the most gorgeous manner. These conducted him and his attendants to the arena, where Ahura was received by the marshals, who brought him to the throne, leaving the attendants in the arena. Here Tien saluted on the sign of Taurus. We just entered that, FYI. Expo, and Ahura answered in the sign of friendship, Aries. Tien signaled privacy, and so all other fell back, leaving Ahura and Tien alone. Tien said, "Come thou and sit beside me on the throne." Ahura said, "Because thou hast not forgotten me, I am rejoiced." And he went up and sat on the throne. Tien said, "Because thou art my friend, I love thee. Because thou art beside me, I am rejoiced. It is more than 1,000 years since my eyes have beholden thee. Tell me, Ahura, how is it with thyself and thy kingdom?" Ahura said, "As for myself, I am happy. For the greater part, my kingdom is happy also. My trials have been severe and long enduring, but of my 4,000 million more than half of them are delivered beyond atmosphere, highest rays, and of the others they grade from 50 to 90. Tien said, "For thy more than 2,000 years toil, what hast thou gained by striving to raise up these Drudras?" Ahura said, "This is only Tien's peace and rejoicing in my soul." Tien said, "Whereupon hang two philosophies. One speaketh peace and rejoicing by laboring with the lowest of the low, the other by leading the highest of the high. As for myself, the matter suiteth me better than the former. I tell thee, Ahura, all things come of the will. If we will ourselves to shut down and out horrid sights and complainings, such as the poor Druk and the Druge indulge in, we have joy in a higher heaven. To me, it is thus sympathy to our most damnable enemy, for it bindeth us to the wretched and miserable. To put away sympathy is to begin to be a great master over others, to make them subservient to our wills." Ahura said, "It is not a good thing to help the wretched." Tien answered, "To help them in like drinking nectar, to make one's senses buoyant for the time being. That is all. They relapse and are less resolute than before, but depend on being helped again. For such reason, he who helpeth the wretched doth wrong them willfully. To make them know their places, this is the highest. For they have not even the gods to submit to their places. To learn to be happy with one place and condition is too great wisdom. Herein have thousands of gods fallen. They have helped up the poor and wretched as one may, in sympathy to serpents. Take them into his house and pity them. They have immediately turned and bite their helpers. But speak thou, O Ahura, for I have respect to thy words." Ahura said, "If a man plant an acorn in a flower pot and take it root and grow, one or two things must follow. The growth must be provided against, or the pot will burst. Even thus draweth from the sources around about the lowest Druge in heaven. None of the gods can bind him forever. Alas, he will grow. All our bondage over them cannot prevent the soul, soon or late, taking root and growing. However, when we can be gods over them forever." Tien said, "Thou art a god over them. I am a god over them. Where is the difference?" Ahura said, "I am not in my own name. Though I am God over them, yet I am not God over them. For I teach them they shall not worship me, but Jehovah. I train them that I may raise them away from me. Neither do my people serve me, but serve the Great Spirit. Thou teachest thy Drujas that thou art the highest, and they shall be contained to serve the everlasting. Thou dost limit them to the compass of thy kingdom. I do not limit my subjects, but teach them that their progression is forever onward and upward. Tian said, how do we know? But the time will come until then, and they shall say, alas, I was taught in error. They told me there was a great spirit, a person compromising all things, but I found him not. Will they not then revolt also? Was not this cause of Deus' fall? He had searched the heavens to the extreme, but found no Jehovah. Then he returned and possessed himself of heaven and earth. Although he failed and is cast into hell, it is plain that his sympathy for the Drujas caused his fall. From his errors I hope to guard myself, for I shall show no sympathy for the poor or the wretched. Neither will I permit education on earth or in heaven, save to my lords or marshals. When a mortal city pleaseth not, I will send spirits of darkness to flood unto destruction. Yeah, they shall incite mortals to fire the place and to riot and death. Thus will I keep the Drujas of heaven forever busy playing games with mortals, and to bring provender and dadems to forever glorify my heavenly kingdom. Ahura said, where in all the world have a self-god stood and not fallen? Tian said, thou mayest ask immortals, where is a kingdom or a nation that stood and hath not fallen? Yet thou perceivest nations continue to try to find themselves everlastingly, but they are leveled in time. Things spring up and grow and then fall into dissolution. Will it not be so with ourselves in the far future? We will not become one with the everlasting changing elements and as nothing and wasted anyway. Ahura said, one might say of man and spirits, there were some seeds planted, and many of them rotted and returned to earth, but others took root and grew and became large trees. But yet it is not true also of the trees that they have a time, for they die and fall down and rot and also return to earth. Ahura continued, admit this to be true, O Tian, and that the time may come when thou and I shall pass out of being. Doth it not follow that for the time we live, we should contribute all we have to make others happy? Tian said, if by doing it will render ourselves happy, with no danger to our kingdom, then yeah, verily, for which reason we are not forced back after all the position that we should labor for our own happiness without regard to others. One man delighteth in art, another in philosophy, another in helping the poor and wretched, another in eating and drinking, and another in ruling over others. Shall not they have enjoyment in the way of their desires? Shalt thou say to him that delighteth in eating and drinking, stop thou, come and delight thyself, helping thy wretched? Ahura said, this I have seen. The intelligent and clean have more delight than do the stupid and filthy. The rich more enjoyment than the poor. As for ourselves, we delight more in seeing the delighted than in seeing the wretched. More do we delight to see a child smile than to hear it cry. But there be such that delight more to make a child cry than to see it smile. But such persons are evil and take delight in evil. Shall we then indulge them in their means of delight? Or is there not a limit, as when we say all men have the right to that which delighteth themselves, provided it may not the delight of others? Tian said, thou hast reasoned well. We shall delight ourselves only in such ways as do not mar the delight of others. Whereupon Ahura said, then I am not delighted with the manner of thy kingdom, and thou shouldest not practice what gaveth me pain, because thou hast resolved to educate not mortals nor angels, thou hast raised a hideous wall in the face of gods. Tian said, this also that will omit that as we desire to delight ourselves, we should look for the things that delight us and turn away from the things that delight us not. Therefore, let not the gods turn their faces this way, but to their own affairs. Ahura said, Thou art wise, O Tian, but this I have found, that something within us groweth, that will not down nor turn aside. In the beginning of life, we look to ourselves, which is the nature of the young. But when we grow, we take a wife, and we delight to see her delighted. Then cometh offspring, and we delighted to see them delighted. After this, we delight to see our neighbors delighted. And then the state, and when the whole kingdom, this delight to be delighted groweth within us. And when we become gods, we delight no longer in the delight of a few only, but we expand upon many kingdoms. As for myself, I first delighted in the delight of Varaparshanara, but now I delighted to see other gods and other kingdoms delighted. For that I have come to thee. I fear thy fate. I love thee. I love all thy people, good and bad. Behold, this I have found, that it is easier much to suffer a river to run its course than to dam it up, and a dam up river and not have it overflow or break the dam. This I have not found. The course of the spirit of man is groweth, and goeth onward like a running river. When thou shuttest up the mouth, saying, Thus far and no further, I fear for thee. I tried this matter once. I was flooded. The dam was broken. I see the shuttering out knowledge from mortals and angels, but I tell thee, O Tien, the time will come when the channel will be too broad for thee. Tien said, How should I answer such great wisdom? Where find a God like unto thee, O Ahura? And yet behold, the Lord God Anunnaki toiled with these hundreds of years and learned all these things. Yea, he traveled in the far-off heavens, where there are gods and kingdoms which have been for millions of years. And he came back and renounced a great person, Jehovah. He said, All things are not as a harmonious whole, but a jumbled, a disordered mass, playing catch-up as catch can. Ahura said, And what hath befallen him? And here is not a great argument, for we behold in all times and conditions and places, in heaven and on earth, wherever people assume doctrines like unto his, they begin to go down into hell. They flourish a little while, but only as a summer plant to yield in the winter's blast. For this I have seen for a long time coming against these heavens, even thine, that a darkness crush Deus, so will the heavenly dominion soon or late fall, and in the shock and fray, thou wilt suffer a fate like unto Deus. Tien said, For the wise words, Ahura, I am the servant. I will consider thy argument and remember thee with love. In 1,000 years from now, I may be wiser, and I may have a kingdom so built up that it will be an argument stronger than words. Hereupon the two gods brought their argument to a close, and Tien signaled his vice gods and marshals, and they came, and when Ahura and Tien had saluted each other, Ahura was conducted away from the place of the throne, and after that beyond the capital, the vice gods and marshals delivered him to his own attendants, and with them he embarked in his octavan and set sail for Sudiga's heavenly kingdom over the land of Vinyu. Suga, after assuming a heaven unto himself, moved it over the Nuwa mountains and called it Kurdat, in which place he had 8,000 million angel slaves, after the same manner as Tien's. Sudiga's capital city, Swarchisia, his highest heavenly seat, was modeled after the fashion of Sanctu Deus, heavenly place in Horde, at the time of the greatest magnificence. The capital house of Suga was made of precious stones and gems, the work of thousands of millions of angels for many years. And when Horde was pillaged prior to Deus being cast into hell, millions of its most precious ornaments were stolen and brought to Herdat. The streets of Herdat were paved with precious stones, and an arena surrounded the palace on every side, set with crystals of every shade and color. and in every conceivable manner of workmanship. On the borders of the arena stood 500 million sentinels, arrayed in gorgeousness such as only gods had looked upon. Instead, the line of sentinels were 1 million pillars of fire, kept brilliant day and night by the toil of 500 million slaves. Inside the line of the pillars were 1 million marshals, so arrayed in splendor, one could scarce look upon them. These were watch and watch with 2 other groups of 1 million each, and they stood watch 8 hours each. None but the vice gods and the high marshals could cross the arena to the palace, walking but must crawl on their bellies, and for every length crawled, they must kiss the pavement and recite an anthem of praise to Sudga, who now took both names, Sudga and Deus. Neither must any one repeat the same anthem twice, but it must be a new anthem for each and every length of the person. For a tall person, 1,000 lengths were required. From the line of a marshals to the palace, 1,000 anthems, so that only the few, as compared to his millions, ever laid eyes on the throne of Sudga. And after they beheld him on the throne, for they were only permitted to gaze but once on him, and that a great distance, and amid such a sea of fire, there scarce could see him. They must recrawl back again to the place of the beginning, again reciting another 1,000 anthems, which made Sudga almost inaccessible, and permitted only such as were favored to even look upon him, which with the ignorant is a great power. When Ahura came to the capital and sent word to Sudga, who he was, praying audience, Sudga gave orders to admit him, commanding Ahura to walk upright into his presence, along with the vice gods. Accordingly, in this manner, Ahura came before Sudga and saluted in love and esteem, answered by Sudga in friendship of old. The latter at once commanded privacy, and so all others withdrew, and Ahura and Sudga went up and sat on the throne. Sudga said, because thou hast come to see me, I am overflowing with joy, because I know thou hast come to admonish me for my philosophy in the manner of my dominions. I respect thee, because thou didst once try to find a kingdom of thy own and failed. I sympathize with thee, but just thou wentest back on thyself and accepted Jehovah, and so was rescued from thy peril. I commiserate thee. Ahura said, to hear thy gifted tongue once more is a great joy. To know that no misfortune was in store for thee, and thy kingdom would give me great delight. Because I love thee and the people of thy mighty heavenly kingdom, I have come to admonish thee and plead for thy Jehovah's sake. As for myself, I found that to cast all my cares on him, and then turn in and work hard for others, these 2 things give me the greatest happiness. Sudga said, can a brave man justly cast his cares upon another? Was not thyself given to thyself for thyself? If so, thou dearest none to work for thee. If so, that hast thou a right to work for others. If thou prevent them from working out their own destiny, wrongest not thou them? Moreover, thou sayest to cast thy cares on Jehovah and to work hard for others. These 2 give thee greatest happiness. Wherefore art thou not selfish to work for thine own happiness? For it is not this what I am doing for myself in my own way. Ahura said, grant all thy arguments, O Sudga. Where shall we find the measure of righteousness works but in the sum of great results? For you or me to be happy, that is little. For 1,000,000 angels to be happy, that is little. But when we put 2 kingdoms alongside, and they be of the same size, and they have the same great numbers of inhabitants, it is not just that we weigh them in their whole measure to find which of the 2 kingdoms have the greater number of happy souls. Would not this be a better method of arriving at the highest philosophy? Sudga said, yeah, that would be higher than logic, higher than reason. That would be the foundation of a sound theory. Ahura said, and have we not found both in heaven and earth that all kingdoms that overthrown have the cause of their fall in the unhappiness and disaffection of the ignorant. As soon as the masses began to be in unrest, the rulers applied vigorously measures to repress them, but it is only adding fuel to the fire. It deadeneth in a while, but only to have it burst forth more violently afterward. What's happening in society now is happening here. Are you happy? Can you afford your food bill and the gas bill and the electric? Can you afford everything going up with inflation? Are you happy? And that people who we put into office, we vote in, supposedly, that only supposed to make over $150,000 a year, have more than a big chunk of abundance, and you can't question it because rules for thee and not for me. Yep. Thugga said, "Thou reasonest well, O Ahura, go on." Ahura said, "How then shall we determine the happiness of two kingdoms, in order to determine which hath the greater happiness? Are not revolts evidence of unhappiness? Hear me then, O Thugga, where in all the Jehovian heavens hath there ever been a revolt? And on the earth, where have the Jehovians, the faithless, rebelled against their rulers? Behold, in the far off Etherian heavens, the Nirvanian fields have never been any god or chief environ in tortures. As for my own kingdom, my people will not rebel against me, nor need I fortify myself against disaster." Thugga said, "Thou art wise, O Ahura. The only way to judge a kingdom's happiness is by the peace and contentment and civility of its people toward one another, and by the confidence betwixt the ruler and the ruled. He who hath a guard himself liveth on the eve of the destruction of his kingdom and himself. And yet, Ahura, remember this, the Jehovians of heaven and earth are high raised, they become such. Anyone can be a ruler for them, for they know righteousness, but I have to deal with drooks and drujas. How then canst thou compare my kingdom with the Nirvanian kingdoms?" Ahura said, "Alas, O Thugga, I fear my arguments are void before thee. Thou showest me that the line betwixt selfishness and unselfishness is finer than a spider's web. Even gods cannot distinguish it. And yet, behold, there was a time when I said, I will be a mighty God, and I will not bow to the unknown that brought me into being. For this I labored long and hard. The responsibility of my kingdom finally encroached upon my happiness. Long after that, I put away all my responsibility and made myself a servant to Jehovah. Then a new happiness came over me, even when I had nothing that was mine in heaven and earth. This is also unknowable to me. It is within my members as a new tree of delight. This is that I would tell thee of, but I cannot find it. It flieth not away. It batheth words. Even as a description of the Great Spirit is void because of his wondrous majesty, such is the joy of his service that even gods and angels cannot describe it. With its growth, we look famine in the face and weep not. We see falling Jai and fear not. With the ebb and flow of the tide of Jehovah's works, we flow as one with him, with a comparative joy. Thugga said, "To hear thy voice is joy to me. To not hear thee is great sorrow. Behold, I will consider thy words of wisdom. In the far off place I will come in remembrance and love to thee. Thus ended the interview, and Suga installed his vice gods and high marshals to come, where he saluted Ahura in the sign of craft, and Ahura answered him in the sign time. And when Ahura betwixt the vice gods, led by the high marshals, departed, passed beyond the arena, where the vice gods and high marshals gave him into the charge of the martial hosts, who conducted him beyond the line of sentinels, where Ahura joined his own attendants and went with them into his octagon and set sail for Ihoadin, Osiris's heavenly place, which had been over Puri Sea, but now moved over Arabia. Chapter 44, sorry. At this time, Osiris' heavenly kingdom numbered 13,000 million angels, good and bad, and it was the largest heavenly kingdom ever established on the earth. It was built after the manner of Sugas, that is to say, modeled after Sanctu and Horde, but more magnificent than Suga's kingdom and far larger. The arena way was 5,000 lengths of a man across, so that approaching visitors to the throne must crawl 2,000 lengths in order to approach the throne. And they also had to repeat an anthem of praise or a prayer for every length crawled, going and coming, and they were, like at Suga's, permitted to approach only to within a long distance from Osiris, whilst the array of lights around him were so dazzling that scarcely any could look upon him. And they that thus approached were so reverential that their minds magnified Osiris' glorious appearance so much they verily believed that they looked into the Creator's face and saw of a truth man was of his image and likeness. And thousands and even millions that thus crawled to look upon him afterward went about in heaven, preaching Osiris as the veritable all highest creator of heaven and earth. Osiris made his godhead to consist of 3 persons. First, himself as the fountain of the universe, whose name was unspeakable. Second, Baal, his only begotten son, into whose keeping he had assigned the earth and all mortals thereon. And third, Azaroth, his virgin daughter, into whose keeping he had assigned life and death, or rather the power of begetting and power to cause death with mortals. Osiris was the most cunning of all the self-gods, for thus he appointed the triangle of the faithless, thus appropriated the names and powers of the Lord God, the false, now in hell. For only through Baal and Azaroth could any mortal or spirit ever obtain to approach the arena of the throne in Agrogadin. And here again they had to pass the high sentinel, Egypt, before they were entitled to the right to crawl on their bellies over the sacred pavement, the way to the heavenly palace. Only the vice gods of Osiris and his chief marshal could walk upright to the capital palace, and they with heads bowed low. And when Osiris was informed of Ahura's coming, he sent word that he should come upright, with head erect, but veiled from the head to the foot. To this Ahura gladly consented, and being thus veiled by Egypt and handed over to the vice gods and the chief marshals, he walked upright till he came to the high arch of the palace. Here they halted, and Ahura saluted on the sign old time love, and Osiris answered in the sign joy in heaven. Whereupon Ahura left the vice gods and walked near the throne, and Osiris came down, and they embraced in each other's arms, not having seen each other for more than 1,000 years. Osiris signaled the vice gods and chief marshals to fall back, and they did so, and they ascended the throne and sat thereupon privately. Osiris said, "This is great joy. To meet one's loves, is not this greater, after all, than all the pomp and glory of the gods?" Ahura said, "True, but who is wise enough to live to enjoy so cheap a glory? We run afar off, We build up mighty kingdoms, and our palaces are replete with great magnificence. In search after what? While is that which doth cost nothing, love, the greatest good of all in the heaven and earth, we leave out in the cold. More delight have I to again look upon thy buoyant face and hear the music of thy voice than I have ever in my heavenly kingdom of 7,000 million angels. Osiris said, is it not so with all gods, with mortal kings and queens? Thy boast of the extent and power of their countless millions, and yet they have not more to love them than would match in numbers their fingers' ends, whom they can take into their arms in the fullness of reciprocity. What then are pomp and glory? Are not kings and queens of earth but watchdogs to guard the stinking flesh and bones of other mortals? And are not the gods equally base in their dirty trade of ruling over foul-smelling drujas? Horus said, it is so, but once is this great desire to rule over others, to lead them, to be applauded, and to revel in toil of the millions. Would it not be wise for the gods who understand this to resign their mighty kingdoms to go along with their loves to feast in the great expanse of the universe? Osiris said, true, Ahura, but who hath power to do this? Certainly not the gods, and it is not so with mortals. For thousands of years have they not been told, except ye give up your earthly kingdoms and give up your riches. Ye cannot raise in heaven, but behold, the rich man cannot give up his riches. The king cannot give up his kingdom. They are weak indeed, as well except on unhatched bird to fly, as for such souls to be but slaves in our dominions. This do I perceive also of my own kingdom. I cannot give it up, because forsooth I cannot give up the desire to give it up, although my judgment saith it would be the highest, best thing for me. Horus said, are not great possessions like unto disposition? I have seen mortals who admit the highest, best thing to do is to live the highest, best one knoweth, and straightway go off and pollute the body by eating flesh and drinking wine. They also know the right way, but to obtain to the desire to put in practice what one knoweth to be the highest, they have not reached. Osiris said, yeah, all this is disposition, and if a great man give away what he have, is not that also disposition? Can it be true, O Ahura, that even as we manipulate mortals to drive them to war or to make them play peace, to make them destroy their kingdom and build up on others by our angel armies, which they know not of, that we ourselves are ruled over by the gods in the Etherian heavens? Horus said, I seem to me thus, Osiris, that is to say, that the Etherian gods above us rule us, but not in the same way, but their absence from us when we do unjustly, and by their presence when we do righteously. We rule over mortals by direct action upon them, shaping their destinies by our heavenly wills, and they are often cognizant of our angel servants being with them. But when we cannot appropriate a mortal to do our wills, we withdraw our angels and suffer him to fall into the hands of Drudras. Ahura continued, not that gods above us, Osiris, send evils upon us, but that we foster evils within our own kingdoms, which take root like thorns and nettles in a neglected field, and they grow and environ us. Even this I have seen in thy heavens in the far future. It will come upon thee, O Osiris, with all thy wisdom and strength, that thou will meet the same fate as Deus and be cast into hell. Osiris said, were I to judge by all the self-gods who have been before me, I should assent unto thy wise judgment, but hear me thou. O Ahura, for mine is not like any other heavenly kingdom, nor formed for my own glory only, This then is that I will accomplish. I will cast out sin from amongst mortals and all manner of wickedness, and I will give them a heavenly kingdom on earth. They shall war no more, nor deal unjustly with one another, nor have suffering, nor immature deaths, nor famines, nor sickness, but peace and love and righteousness and good works and nobleness. For I will go down to them in person in time to come, and I will take with me angels high rised, and appoint them unto mortals, and give them corporal bodies for their pleasure, and they shall be the teachers of man on the earth. And man shall put away all selflessness, and deceit, and lust, and lying, and the races of men shall be taught how to beget the offspring in purity and wisdom. And in that day I will take back the judges of heaven and ingraft them on mortals, and re-raise them up with understanding. Wherefore, O Ahura, though I fortify myself in all this, am I not laboring in the right way? Ahura said, It seemeth to me a dangerous proceeding. I would compare thy plan to that of a teacher who took his pupil into a place of vice to teach him virtue. How can a heavenly kingdom exist amongst mortals, save with celibates, and they cannot people the world? Is there any other way but by the delight of the lowest passion that man can be born into life? What belongeth to the flesh is of the flesh. The spirit reputeth the earth. Osiris said, It hath been said so, but I will cast the higher love down into the lower. Ahura said, Why so thou canst, but alas, will it remain down and forever grovel on the earth? I have seen a sweet maiden wed to a vicious husband, and he shifted him not up, but he pulled her down. Will not it be so with the higher love, when thou weddest it to the passions? Behold the manner of the oracles. We appoint high-rised angels to answer the questions of mortals, to lead them up to virtue and wisdom. But alas, mortals come not to the oracles to learn these things, but to learn wickedness and war and earthly gain. Will it not be so with thy kingdom founded on earth? Instead of helping mortals up, mortals will be pulled down, the angels to answer them in the most sinful desires and curiosities. Osiris said, Thou hast great reason in thy sight, and facts withal, to sustain thee. Yet forget not, Ahura, I shall have a temple built of stone on the earth, and a chamber where I can come and command the kingdom through the mortal king. Ahura said, Behold, my mission is fruitless. I have now visited my three loves, Tian and Suga and thee, and I cannot turn one, even a jot or a title. In this I have great sorrow, for I fear the time may come when great darkness will be upon all of you. Osiris said, I will consider these wise words, O Ahura, and through thou now goest me, my love will follow thee. Whereupon Osiris signaled the chief marshal and the vice gods, and they came. Then Osiris and Ahura embraced each other and parted, both saluting in the sign love forever. Ahura retired even as he came, but backward, the vice gods on either side, and the marshal leading the way. After they crossed the arena, Ahura was delivered to Egypt, and the great marshal and the vice gods entered and returned to Osiris. Egypt passed Ahura on his own attendants, who conducted him to his fire ship, wherein they embarked and set sail for his own heavenly place, Varapishanara. 45. Jehovah suffered the self-gods to prosper for more than 400 years, and Tian and Suga and Osiris became the mightiest gods that ever ruled on the earth. Know then these things of them in heaven and earth, whereof the libraries of Jehovah's kingdoms relate more fully than of which the following is a synopsis, to wit. First of Tian, then Suga, then Osiris, and of Tian's heavenly kingdom, two vice gods, No John and Wangisyat, chief high marshal Kolatska, and another him 30,000 marshals, chief general Hai Gian, and under him 100,000 generals and high captains. Of these 20,000 were allotted to dominion of mortals in Japheth. The others served in heaven, mostly about the throne of Tien. Chiefly distinguished as gods on the earth were Tien's 14 chief generals. Kaeken, Kat, Yam Yam, Tushinwo, Hojinyo, Waka, Okiyanas, Heng Li, Lutzrum, Li Wang, Thruwachich, Igura Roth, Isaiah, Tugao, and Ahoshun. These generals were divided into 2 parts, 7 each, and they were allotted equally of the 20,000 ranked generals deputed to the earth, and these again were allotted each 30,000 angel warriors. Tien had said to these 14 chief generals, "When ye come to earth and finding 2 cities near together, both of which worship other gods than me, ye shall divide yourselves into 2 parts. One army shall go to one mortal city and the other to another. And by inspiration and otherwise, ye shall bring the 2 cities to war against each other, until both are broken down or destroyed. After which ye shall inspire another city that worship me to come and possess both of those that are destroyed. Better it is to make our enemies kill each other than to kill them ourselves." And such was the mode of warfare by Tien, that all the land of Japheth was subdued unto himself in less than 100 years, save the matter of 1,000,000 faiths scattered here and there, and of the Lycians who were in the mountains and wilderness, and great and costly temples were built in all cities of Japheth, and dedicated to Tien, creator and ruler of heaven and earth. Now as to the worshippers of Jos and Johos, they were not converted but subdued, and they worshipped their God in secret, and made rites and ceremonies whereby they might know one another and the better escape persecution. Many of these rites partook after the manner of the ancient rite of Bagahan God. Of the great cities destroyed in the wars were Ronghi, Chaogo, and Shangtu. For Hang Wei, the wars lasted 20 years, and there were slain within the city 500,000 men, women, and children. The wars of Chaogo lasted 40 years. Within her walls were slain 300,000 men, women, and children. For Shang Tadu, the wars lasted 25 years, and there were slain within her walls 300,000 men and women and children. In the destruction of Ho Wei, there were consigned to ashes 400 houses of philosophy, 2,400 colleges, and 12,000 public schools, all of which have been made glorious in the reign of Hung, the king of the city, because he worshipped Johas. His great city was destroyed. In Chaogo, there were destroyed 600 houses of philosophy, 200 colleges of great learning. Here was the temple of Jonk, which was dedicated to worship of Jos, God, and which in building required 20,000 men to 12 years. It had 2,000 pillars of awana stone, polished, and at the blood altar it had 12,000 skulls, of which the great king Bakho was slaughtered in the name of Johas. The throne of worship for the king was set with diamonds and pearls, and it had 1,000 candlesticks of gold and silver, and the fine silk drapery and fine wool drapery within the temple were sufficient. It spread out for 500,000 men to lie down on and yet not cover up the half of it. And the drapery was painted and embroidered with pictures of battles and wars, and of scenes in heaven. For the ornamentation of which drapery 20,000 men and women had labored for 40 years, all of which were destroyed, together with all the great city and all the riches and magnificence. Xi'an Tidu was a city of fashion and splendor, inhabited by richest men in the world. She had a temple called Cha-Ohi King, dedicated to learning, but in fact appropriated to the display of wealth and pageantry. It was round, with a high projecting roof, the eaves of which rested 10,000 pillars of polished stone. There were 400 doorways to enter the temple, but within each doorway one came against the square columns of precious stones that supported the roof inside. And either side of the columns were passageways that led into 400 chambers within. In the center of the temple, artificial stalagmites, 20,000 hung from the roof. These were made of silk and wool and fine linen and painted and of color, so bright that mortal eyes could scarce look upon them. And they were as ice with the sun shining thereon, forming rainbows in every direction. Here came kings and queens and governors of great learning, for here was deposited copies of the greatest books in all the world. Besides the temple of Cha-Oki king, there were 7 great temples built to Jas, either of which was large enough for 10,000 men to do sacrifice in one time. For 25 years, the people of Shangdu too fought to save their city from great destruction, but it fell and was destroyed, and all the temples with it by King Bingha. It was laid low. Next to these were the following great cities that were destroyed. Jiwugi, which had 100 houses of philosophy and 40 colleges of great learning, 1 temple with 800 polished pillars and 2,000 arches, 30 temples of wheat and corn sacrifice, 1 feed house, where was stored food for 100,000 people in case of famine, sufficient for 8 years. And all these and the libraries of records of the gods and lords of earth and all things, whatever in the city was burnt to ashes. The city of Young-O of 200,000 inhabitants, which had 70 houses of philosophy and 35 colleges of great learning, besides many schools on 1 temple of the stars, where lectures were given daily to the people to teach them the names and places of the stars and their wondrous size and motion, 40 temples of sacrifice, 7 of which were large enough to hold all the inhabitants of Young-O, the great city. But King Shanging, it was laid in ashes, and nothing but heaps of stone remained to tell where the city had been. The city Guanxi, which had 30 houses of philosophy and 70 temples of sacrifice, 2 temples of the stars dedicated to Jas, 85 colleges of great learning, and also a feed house stored sufficiently to feed the city 7 years. And there were 200,000 inhabitants within the city walls. 12 years the people of this city fought against the incited plunderers and warriors against the god Tien, but were conquered at last, and their city laid low. And the great city Ji and Owan and Chang and Gun and Kai'an and Zhangwang and So and Huachagang and Sim Sin and Ji and Ti Wing. Oh, here we go with all these names. And Klo and Doth and Ami and Kakshu and Gu and Hang Sige and Chi Young and Boi Gunk, all which had houses of philosophy and colleges of great learning and public schools and temples of sacrifice and feed houses and hundreds of thousands of inhabitants, and all these cities were destroyed, and only heaps of stone left to tell where they had been. Besides these, there were more than 2,000 cities of less prominence destroyed, and yet all villages and small cities were great, they in the number in which they destroyed, that no man ever counted them. City against city, king against king, man against man. For the inhabitants of Jaeth were obsessed to madness, and war and destruction almost without cause would they fall upon one another to destroy. For so far had Tien sent his hundreds of millions of warring angels to inspire mortals to destroy all knowledge and instruction and learning and philosophy, and to destroy all trace of all other gods and lords, that he alone might reign supreme. And these angels taught mortals how to make explosive powder and guns to shoot with, more deadly than the bow and arrow, and taught the secret of underdigging a city and blowing it up with explosive powder. Well, DUMDS. So the fair land of Japheth, which is wisdom and great learning, was made as a distracted and broken up country. In all directions, the bones of mortals were scattered over the lands, nor could the land be tilled without digging amongst the skulls and bones of other great giant races of Ihoons that once had people in it. Giants! Hi, guys. Giants existed. And of those who were not destroyed, one might say, there were a poor, half-starved, sickly breed, discouraged and helpless, badly whipped. And the spirits of the dead were on the battlefields, lighting up the dark nights by their spirit fires. And in the morning and in the twilight of evening, they could be seen by the hundreds of thousands walking about, shy and wild, but an abundance of familiar spirits dwelt within mortals, took on sagrious forms, and ate and drank with them, and even did things of which it is unlawful to mention. This was Japheth, one to the god Tien. Now Siga ye know. I'm going to leave it there. That was a lot, but worth it. Definitely worth it. Can we start making like parallels to what's happening now and what's becoming of what's happening in this chapter? In the chapters I just read, little chunk. Giants and reptilians, oh my. What are we starting to discover? Whose bones are becoming more out there in the mainstream? Giant bones. So I'm going to leave you with that. I hope you enjoyed. It's some good stuff. I just can't do the names. It's painful, but I did it anyway. Sending each and every one of you love and light. Happy 420. Happy 420. I hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you on the next one. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You're helping me out. If you have anything in your heart to help me with the love donation, that would be super appreciative. I'm still in the struggle and it's getting real. It's been getting real the last 6 months, but every month it's been really, really, it's now I'm done. So I will see you on the next one. I hope in the next 10 days I can figure out what am I going to do. See ya.